Hello. Yeah. Hi. Welcome everyone to the panel on which discusses various career opportunities and trajectories that you might consider or have might considered, including life as a scientist, as a policymaker, or as an entrepreneur. We're going to have a chit chat among ourselves for a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes or so, and then we will take questions. And in the panel, we have a distinguished set of guests, starting with Anna Agarwal, Ramesh Hariharan, Anil Sahasrabuddhe, and Amit Agarwal. I hope I pronounced all of your names correctly. And the first thing I'm going to do is to pass on the mic so that each person can give a couple of minute introductions. I mean, a little bit more than what your last degree was or where you work. Just a little bit, a short perspective on who you really are and what brought you here. So I'll start with Anna.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Agarwal. I work as a researcher at a public policy think tank called Center for Policy Research and work on energy and environment issues. And as Henna mentioned in her introduction, I did my engineering from IIT Delhi, then went on for graduate studies to MIT. There, during my graduate studies, I got interested in energy, and what I realized is that in a country like India, while technology is a key part of addressing energy issues, there are several other issues around deployment, implementation, scaling up these technologies that are equally, if not more important. And that got me interested in working on social science and policy issues. So that sort of started off my career as a researcher in this area.
Hello, my name is Ramesh Hariharan, and I am a sort of a computer scientist by training and now an entrepreneur. And the common themes, I guess, that underlie both of these areas are just a drive to understand science, multidisciplinary science, be it computers, be it biology. There are no walls nowadays, and to bring it to bear. Particularly in India, in the world in general, but particularly in India, build expertise, build capability, have an impact on people in India in general. And so I did my bachelor's from IIT Delhi, very similar to Anna. I didn't realize we were both from the same alma mater. And then I did my PhD abroad, and then came back, joined the faculty at the Indian Institute of Science. And there I met three other people who were also thinking. Trying to see what more we could do to have a broader impact on things here. And there were two notable projects that started around the turn of the millennium, around 2000. One was the Simputer project, where those were the days where nobody had a mobile phone, and what an opportunity it was. We actually designed a handheld device from scratch with all kinds of nifty features. You could write, doodle on it. It had speech synthesis in 3 Indian languages. I remember sitting and coding Hindi, Kannada, and Tamil, making the computer speak these 3 languages. An accelerometer that you could actually move things around and play games with. So a lot of interesting, nifty features. I mean, it was a pity that we couldn't. It was too early, and now, of course, everybody has a device. So what an opportunity lost in some sense. But then we started Strand, which was a crossover trying to combine biology and computing to make an impact. And my talk earlier today probably gave you a glimpse of what that is about. And at this point, I'm actually the CEO of Strand Life Sciences and playing more of a business hat, but trying to combine, on the one hand, academic work with technology building, with business building, and trying to wear all 3 hats at the same time.
Thank you. I am Anil Sahasrabuddhe, currently chairman of All India Council for Technical Education in Delhi. But my career started from Karnataka, Hubli, and then Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And my job was taken up in remote northeast Arunachal Pradesh, then came to IIT Guwahati as faculty member. And then in the very same city, I was director for 9 years in College of Engineering, Pune. And later, I've shifted to now Delhi as chairman of AICTE. And interestingly, my connect with Varun starts from this college here in Pune, that their aspiring minds used to have the employability test, which is a challenge today in terms of employability of graduates. And through that mechanism, we got to know each other. And today, as a regulator of technical education in the country with large number of institutions, very poor quality institutions, some of them good institutions, there is a big challenge in converting all of them into good institutions. And that's what, as a policymaker, we are trying to do.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amit Agarwal. What a day it's been, hasn't it? Just like the Literature Fest, we now have finally a Science Fest in India, and hopefully it'll go across cities. So that's going to be our challenge to the organizers to bring it to other cities in India. So I have spent my whole career in the IT industry, first with Accenture, GE, Genpact, etc. And for the last 10 odd years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what the workforce of the future is going to be like. So over the last 2 years, I transitioned into NASSCOM to run this entity called the Skill Council of India. And my job is really to build an ecosystem where we can skill about 4 million people in these new emerging technologies. So that's sort of the initiative that we're working with. We work very closely with the government, with academia, and of course with our own industry. And hopefully over the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be able to build some kind of an ecosystem that allows people not just to get skilled, but more important, as our industry transitions from services to products in a big way, also build a lot of research and science manpower, which is critical for us in our next avatar.
Thanks. My name is Nishit Vishnoi. I'm a professor of computer science at Yale University. And I share several, with I think all of my colleagues here, the fact that I did my undergraduate education in engineering in India, and then I went on to do my PhD in the US. I came back to India right after my PhD and worked for IBM for a few years and Microsoft for a few years, and then I decided to move on to be a professor. So I guess looking at all the panelists here, we are certainly connected in a way that I think we all have an engineering, at least background and empathy, but we are all fairly different people, right? So in terms of where our career paths have been. Of course, and with some people like Ramesh, I mean, they have been crisscrossing and wearing many hats. So I think I'd like to start the discussion by asking the basic question, which is, I mean, given that the focus of the panel is life as a scientist, policymaker, or entrepreneur, in the context of India, what does it mean to be a policy maker? And I guess, Anna, we'll start with you.
So, as I mentioned, I do my research around public policy issues. So, I think scientists have quite a crucial role that they can play in this space. Because as scientists and researchers, one thing that we have luxury of doing is taking a longer term perspective on problems, which are important to humanity, but might or might not have the societal attention at the moment. For example, the faculty I had at MIT and my senior colleagues at CPR have worked on the topic of climate change for decades. It's only now that increasingly societal attention is coming on the topic. And so I see my colleagues and now being involved myself, that we are now in a key position to shape and influence government policy positions on these topics. So I think that perspective that you can take on a longer term, at a sort of longer term perspective, and look at problems that might not be immediately important, but are going to be quite critical very soon, and influencing government policies on that.
Thanks. Anil, do you have something to add, since you are also you use the word regulator, so I'm guessing that you have some, probably a more governmental point of view of what does it mean to regulate, create policy, especially for academic institutions like the ones you've been involved in. Can you give us some perspective from the inside?
Yeah, as far as AICTE is concerned, it regulates technical education, as I said. And technical education includes engineering, technology. It also includes architecture, pharmacy, management, hotel management, and some of these fields. As far as any private entity or government wants to start a new institution, they will have to take the approval. And there are standard requirements in terms of infrastructure, faculty, laboratory facilities before giving the approval. And many institutions have come up since independence, where we stood at 0.7% in the gross enrollment ratio to today nearly 26%. Number of institutions have certainly grown, and one of the policy decisions of the government had been access and equity. Those things have been addressed. And there was a third parameter, quality, which was somehow left out, and that's why there are obtained number of institutions where there are no takers, the seats go vacant, and the real challenge for regulator today is how do you either get them on board to some other program, or some of them should be get closed, and these are challenges which we face as a technical regulator. But as a society, I think government needs to take a larger view, not just education, whether it is in terms of energy, which you said, and transport. You have all other issues like environment. I think government needs to have policies for each one of them. And how students are actually made critical thinkers, analytical abilities developed, thereby when they graduate, they will be able to handle such issues. I think that is what is important in education.
So now with Amit, given that you also have a bunch of interests, and I guess including, from what I understood, entrepreneurial as well, what would you have to say about life at the intersection of entrepreneurship, policy? Perhaps you have some experiences and some inside stories which you could share with the audience and the panelists.
Sure. So, for us, as we think of the IT industry, and, I'll speak to represent that industry, I think there is no better time ever than there is today to be somebody who gets tech, either from the science element of it or from the social science element of it, because the whole design piece is based on problems we want to solve as humans. The way technology is evolving today, there is opportunity for us in this country or anywhere else in the world actually to solve most problems that we face today. There is also opportunity today for very young people to actually solve that problem versus first waiting to join a large company, then spending 20 years there, going through the hierarchy, and then hoping they would have the means to get out or the courage to go out and do something themselves. So at some sense, what we would actually say from the industry, what we're seeing, we have this big initiative called 10,000 startups. And what we are seeing is that the stigma for being an entrepreneur who fails and tries again is going away. There are many of our colleagues who have left companies, started their own firm, it didn't work out as well. They actually get a better job than somebody who initially had stayed in a company and then continued to stay in the company because they have learned new experiences. So what we are seeing and what we're trying to encourage everyone to do is to really become part of an ecosystem that tries to take more risk, whether it is inside of a firm or outside of a firm. The 2 points that I'd add related to, let's say, policy of the government or the higher education system on this is that today our entire ecosystem on education is based on learning something very specific and then being tested on it in that specificity. So we lose the ability as individuals to take that learning into a different context. The core way to solve problems actually is to be able to take specific learnings and apply them more generally. So the one big piece we are trying to drive as an IT industry is this move from STEM to STEAM, saying that unless you get people to learn the arts, to learn what human beings struggle, etc. with, it is difficult to have the empathy to figure out what problems there are to solve and then go out and solve them. And the other one from a government perspective, I think, is that given the rapid pace in technology, how do we ensure that the policy makers in government actually understand technology well enough? So that's a big gap in the country today. I think the government is trying to address it, but much more needs to be done.
So my question to you, being an entrepreneur, and also a scientist, and as a professor, I mean, I think you are the most diverse of all of us in terms of various career options. What would your view would be? I mean, and maybe also tell us a little bit about maybe some personal reasons why you switched, and what you missed in one and what you gained. I mean, just is the grass greener on this side or that side, as an entrepreneur, as a scientist, as a professor?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take you back to the late 90s where I was going through this in my mind. So I joined the faculty of Indian Institute of Science in 1995. And those were the days where academic activity in India, particularly, computer science, I used to work in an area which Nishit also works in, broadly speaking, algorithms, design and analysis of algorithms, there were maybe 10 people working on it in the country. And it's one of the most amazingly captivating and engrossing areas that I've seen, and I continue to have that the aha experiences that you get when you solve a problem in that area. There's nothing that matches that, I think. But what I realized is that every one of those aha experiences translating into a publication, there were maybe 2 other people in India who would understand what I was doing. And that was bothering me for a few years. It was as if I was working here, collaborating with my various collaborators across the globe, visiting them in summers. All of that was great, but when I looked at what was really happening in India, and if I were to do this deletion argument, if you delete yourself from the face of the earth, does anything change? And the answer turned out that probably nothing will change, and that was a little bothersome to me. So that's where the thought process started. What can we do that would have a greater impact on the local environment, on the local population, on India in general, as opposed to just making a broader, long-term, but deeper contribution perhaps to science? So that's where the whole story started. And simultaneously, 2 other threads were starting. One was I had gotten very interested in biology. That was the days of the Human Genome Project, and was working with the biologists at the Indian Institute of Science. And in parallel, there were these 3 other colleagues who were thinking similarly. And one thing led to another, and we just ended up forming the company on literally a whim, so to say. It wasn't a super thought out decision. I wasn't weighing pros and cons. And I've realized that one of the things to make decisions in life is to not overthink it. I think you have to go with the flow a little bit, because no matter what path you take has plenty of interesting things to follow. Now, coming to the last part of the question, which is really having been an entrepreneur now for the last 20 years and having sort of one leg which is slowly becoming half and a quarter of a leg in academia, is the grass greener on any one side or the other? I think both worlds have very exciting opportunities to offer. When you're an entrepreneur in a company, I think you see the fruits of impact very clearly. That's number one. I mean, what we've done has helped thousands of patients. It's generated jobs for more than 1,500 people. The impact is very clear to see. The second thing as an entrepreneur is, that deletion argument that I talked about, it very squarely sits on your head. If you delete yourself, the whole endeavor might just come crashing down. If I were at IISc and ran the same deletion argument, if I wasn't there, would IISc continue? Would science continue? Everything would continue. But as Strand, if I delete myself, that would be a significant impact. So there's a lot riding on your heads. The third thing is that, given that there's such a lot riding on your heads, the intensity that it generates, that exhilaration is hard to find. It takes you into a different mental zone altogether, because a lot rides on your head. You've got to make it work. Can't blame anybody else for it. And if you don't do things right, you won't exist tomorrow. So that takes you into a mental zone that's a very different zone. I think you have to be there to feel that zone. So there's lots of interesting, exciting things there. Of course, not to mention the freedom that you get. to chart your course in some sense. You don't have to apply for, a decision, send a letter, reply comes back a month later. You make on-the-spot decisions, probably 20 decisions every day. And, that's a speed that, a rhythm and the speed that you can manage, which otherwise would not be possible in academia. The flip side, of course, is for everybody to see is your life is not often yours to lead anymore. I mean, you are now part of this engine that's running, and you're driving that engine forward, and you cannot. You've got to make decisions based on what takes that engine forward, as opposed to what you feel like doing on any particular day. So as long as your mindset is aligned to that, so I cannot, for example, say, okay, I've submitted a paper to a conference, worked really hard, let me take the next 1 week, I'll go for a vacation. That may not be the case, because you might have really important visitors coming the next day, etc. So your life is not as much your own anymore. So it's a trade-off between all of those things, and but there are exciting things to do in both worlds. So
Okay, so thanks for the answers. My next question is, and I'll go through all the panelists, is since this is a science festival, so many people who are here are naturally, or I'm assuming that they're naturally interested in science. And so I want, from their point of view, people who are interested in science, and the younger people especially, given that we have people who are currently not scientists, I want their perspective as to how they perceive a scientific career and what potential advice that they would have or they would give to such people, given their experience in other domains such as policy or entrepreneur. So we'll start with you, Amit, this time.
So, my view on a scientist is slightly different. I was saying if there's one thing that you might debate, it is the definition of a scientist. So just like the world of business has changed completely and very young people can be successful businessmen, I personally believe this whole piece about a certain path that you have to follow to be a scientist also needs to go through rapid change as we go through the generations as we come along. So why is it that if a young person today can invent something who's in school, why is it if a young person can start a company that you can only be 30, 32, whatever, go through your PhD, etc., to be called a scientist? The other one that I think from our India perspective is a specifically important one is when we think of a scientist, we only think of a technical scientist. So we only think of somebody who has done science or engineering, and then we say that they are the scientists. But actually one of the reasons, and it's coming through in much of the research that's being published on why certain countries are being able to innovate and do better, is just the fact that we have disassociated most of the human interactions and the whole arts, etc., from the way in which a technical scientist is taught something. So their ability to understand the world, empathize the world, and solve problems for the world is a bit of a challenge. So now I'll just come back again and I'll speak specifically for our industry, IT, but I think it can be generalized across. Just like there is no better time for someone to be in the IT industry, I think there is no better time than for somebody to become a scientist. Whether it is a part-time scientist in a company, so I know of many of our own firms that are actually massively investing in scientists. So it's not just that you have to be in a research laboratory in a university, but also if you have to be in a research laboratory in an industry, in the university, this entire industry, academia, research is going to take off in India, just the way the whole talent piece has taken off in the last 10 years. Billions of dollars are actually going to get it spent on industry, academia, research. It's already started, it's going to accelerate very fast. Because for us to be successful product companies, regardless of industry, it is crucial to do research, basic or applied, and it is crucial therefore to have people who are focused on solving those problems. So my personal view is that there is actually a hugely successful career ahead, including making a lot of money, including actually having a lot of freedom, including being able to travel the world and do great things. If somebody pursues a career in science, whether it is a technical science or a social science.
Anil, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I
Add
think I
something.
agree with Amit. There are plenty of opportunities. And the previous question also, whether the life is greener this side or that side, life is greener everywhere. It's only how we really take it forward and do the work with full passion and dedication. That passion and dedication is more important. And therefore, in science, it is observed that it is required probably much more, and also in entrepreneurship compared to policy people. You know, they may be on the office desk, but at least science and entrepreneurs have to put in a lot of hard work. Both of them have their own pluses and minuses, no doubt. But as you rightly said, Amit, that there is no requirement of any degree or be at the age of 30 or 32 to be either a scientist or also to be an entrepreneur. There are plenty of examples of late, both in India. Some of you must be knowing about Gopinath. You know, he started off as an entrepreneurial venture at a very young age of 13, 14. And today in Delhi, we have two twins, actually, Bharadwaj brothers, Yashraj and Yuvraj. Today they are at 20, but they started filing patents at the age of 13 when they were in the school. And today they have 300 employees under their belt. And they have not done any graduation. I think, therefore, there are opportunities to do science, both in a formal way and in informal way. There is a possibility of becoming an entrepreneur, again, with formal education or without that. I think, therefore, we need to go forward in the right direction. That passion is more important.
Anna, do you have something to add? So you are in Delhi, right? And I guess Delhi is one of the hubs of policy research. Even at IIT Delhi now, there is a school of public policy actually working on climate change and issues like this. So that's, I think, one ecosystem that has been created where, you know, IIT Delhi is traditionally an engineering school, and the person who's running this policy, or the dean, is Ambud Sagar, who is from Harvard Kennedy School. He spent his time there, and now he's, after a decade of effort, he finally got this thing. So it seemed, I mean, when I talked to him, it seemed that getting policy changes in the you know, at the highest level requires that kind of perseverance. Do you think things have changed? I mean, I guess making policy about science necessarily means that you must involve scientists in these decision makings. I mean, places like Niti Aayog and others, I mean, have started at least talking to scientists before making or writing extensive documents about how the science policy in India should be conducted. So I'm just want to know, I mean, what your experiences has been and what the atmosphere is. Do you in the future see scientists working for Niti Aayog or neck and neck with policymakers? And I guess, you know, going back to what Amit was saying about empathy, and I think that's a very important point. At the end of the day, for non-trivial progress to happen, different sounding professions must empathize with each other, and the earlier they interact, the better it is. So it's a long question, so take your time.
All right. So the first part of your question was sort of engineering schools, sort of having a policy department or policy school. IIT Delhi is one of them. There are several US universities which are very engineering focused, including MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, which also have a public policy department. And that goes back to what I was earlier saying, that a lot of issues that we face in India or elsewhere around the world, technology innovation is very important, but it is one part of the solution. It is very important to understand how policy will shape sort of deployment, implementation of these technologies, and hence sort of academics are also trying to sort of train engineers, and sort of there's a demand for people who are trained as engineers but also understand public policy aspects to be working on those questions and working hand in hand with government to help them shape these things. There are also several, not several, there are some very good public policy think tanks in India. Some are international think tanks that have also opened up an Indian office, but also places like CPR and others, which have been working on public policy for several decades. So there are lots of opportunities for people with sort of pure science and engineering background who are interested in public policy, working on public policy issues, to either get training or work in organizations that work on these issues. The other aspect is sort of, is government engaging with academia more closely now? I think that's a little complex question, because yes, a lot of us work, because I think one of the main stakeholders for the kind of work we do is government, which makes policy, whether that is central government, state governments, or local governments. So we work very closely with them. But government involves academia, researchers, industry, civil society. There are several groups that come together to influence public policy. Everyone has a different lens of looking at it, and it all needs to sort of come together to make a good decision. So I think there is demand from people who make policy for people trained in those methods, and our ecosystem is sort of providing such venues where people can come and study such topics. Did I miss something? I think one thing I just want to add, and for the younger folks here, is if you're looking to follow a research career, I think it's really important to try to find a place which really supports and invests in research. Because I think that is what really excites me as a researcher, is to be in a place which gives you that independence to work on what you want to work on and be around like-minded people who are very excited about the things they're researching on. Because I think research can be a little bit harder career, as Ramesh was pointing out. There might not be immediate deliverables that you're working on. There could be, 10 people in the world who care about what you do. So you need to be around really like-minded, excited people to keep being motivated. So.
Okay, so it was signaled that I have 5 minutes. So I just want to get a sense of how many people have questions for the panelists. So if you have, you raise your hand so that I'll allocate time. Okay, so I see 4 or 5 questions. These 3 minutes are for what? I mean, we started at 4:40. So the panel is supposed to run 45 minutes or just 30 minutes? Sorry? Just 3 minutes including the questions? Okay. Okay, sure. So I think I just want to give the panelists an opportunity to add maybe in 30 seconds close, and then we will open the floor to questions.
Hello. Anyone have questions?
No. So first I just want to let the panelists in 30 seconds or so close, and then we will open the floor for questions.
I actually don't. I'll wait for the questions.
I think innovation is the key. Actually, we must start innovating at all ends. Probably every institution should think about an innovation lab and allow opportunities for students to work on that. And one of the classic example is Smart India Hackathon, which we started 3 years ago, has started paying rich dividends in terms of that.
Just in terms of closing comments, one of the things, at least my learnings over time, has been that the simplest way to lead your life is to look around you, find a problem that motivates you and you're really passionate about, and then go after it and let the world take care of itself, and interesting things will happen. And that's more or less my definition of science.
So I'll just say a few words. So I'm a professor and I work on problems which are long term. And so one of the comments I would make is that we wouldn't be seeing this explosion in technology and AI or whatever we are seeing today if many scientists wouldn't have spent their lifetimes solving one single problem, right? So I hope that some of you will still get encouraged, because even though it feels like we have invented everything that we need to invent, right? But yet we keep inventing new things, and we have centuries to go, and we have amazingly hard problems to solve. In fact, the problems are only getting harder in some qualitative manner. It's not clear in some objective manner. So, and my profession, which is a professor, is supposed to create an environment for scientists to think securely, to think long term, and plays a different role in society. So I would also make a little bit of a plug-in for that, and with this I'll pass the questions to the audience.
Hello everyone. Yeah. So my question majorly is for Amit here. In fact, others can also answer. So Amit, you said like 2 to 3 times you gave the reference that this is the best time to join the tech industry. But is this really a best time? Considering that the GDP, projected GDP is of 5%, economy is in a downturn mode, and it's been almost a year, plus there are jobs cut are going on, the unemployment growth is quite at its peak. That is the one thing. And secondly also, like if I talk about the Southeast Asian countries, the Vietnam industry, Vietnam IT and ITES industry, they are snatching away the job markets of Indian industry, which are averagely working at a markup of around 12 to 13% IT industry average, vis-a-vis the IT industry in Vietnam, which is just working at a markup of 8%. So why will the US and UK industries outsource, give their operations to the Indian industry, when the skill set and tax incentives and markup at Vietnam industry is quite low?
Super. So I'll take 1 minute and maybe just pass it to anybody else who wants to comment. So the first is, at one basic level, the talent sits in India. There is 1 billion people here. So there is a data point which is very interesting. Between 2019 and 2030, India is going to add 90 million, so 9 crore people to our workforce. About 1 crore are coming in each year. In the same time, between 2019 and 2030, China's workforce is going to reduce by 67 million, about 7 crore people. The second highest country in terms of workforce addition, it's fascinating. So I said 90 million. The second highest country is 4 million people, which is the US. So fundamentally, if there is work to be done, and there is massive work that is coming in the new technologies as the world changes, the talent is all here. Yes, there are current issues. The industry is going through its entire disruption, which is why I think it's the best time to join. You know, I joined in the early 90s when it wasn't clear what this industry would do. I joined the BPO side, right? So my mom called me and said, "Beta, tum call center mein kya karu? You know, what are you going to do in a call center?" So that's when I started. The reality is that created a $50 billion industry. Right? So I think as we go along, the product businesses, the way IT changes, in the next 10 to 15 years, more wealth is going to get generated through tech. And tech enabled other businesses, whether it is life science, whether it is pharma, whether it is healthcare, whether it is BFSI, you go one by one, it is all going to be about tech. So that's my view, but I'll pass it to the others.
As an entrepreneur, you want to say? No, I think the new technologies which are emerging are going to create new jobs. See, why downturn is there? Because routine type of software coding is not going to fetch any jobs. And that's why there are reduction in job and the GDP is getting lowered. If you all get into AI, IoT, machine learning, deep learning, robotics, 3D printing, you know, these are the areas which are upcoming areas. 40% of the new jobs are going to be in these domains. And if you get prepared yourself, which is not happening today, unfortunately, and if you prepare ourselves, I think we can give products to the entire world. And then GDP also simultaneously will grow.
Yeah, so it's a dynamic world. I think things will change from day to day. I think some fundamentals hold. So if one has to differentiate. I think that's always the case. Each of us has to think about how we are differentiating in such a way that there are very few others who can do what we can do. And to that extent, if you keep that in mind and build skill, build capability, then chances are no Vietnam can take away things. And if you build, I mean, there's AI today, it's going to last for a while, there'll be other things tomorrow, etc. But if you build fundamentally deep skill in an area and have the ability to transition quickly, I think you're set for good. But building skill takes time, so I think it's important to invest that initial time in building a deep enough level of skill, which not too many people have, which will then allow you to, go, evolve with the times.
That covers what.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is to take all the questions which are remaining at once and then let the panelists address them. So,
Hello.
I think
Hello. I have the question for Anna. Looking at the climate change worldwide, I wanted to know that where does India stand in making the policies and innovation and technologies to stop the climate change or to reduce our impact on this climate change? You cannot hear me?
yes, we can hear you, but I'm asking if there's. I think a question is what's India's position on climate change, which is. Let's wait for more questions and then we'll. Yeah, so there's some person, that person there.
Hello. It was a nice discussion. So since we are talking about many roads taken in science particularly, a couple of more career options that come to us are science communication. So for example, I was greatly astonished by something called ex vivo animations, which create beautiful science related, basically biology related animations associated with Harvard Medical School. So when I checked the profile of people associated with it, I found out that they are people which are getting training in, say, some computer art or something related to animations, illustrations. So what is the scope of that kind of jobs in India? And another kind of job opportunities that we come up beyond research and industry is something called data analysis, clinical data analysis. So there is something called CRO, Clinical Research Organization, which deals about how you are analyzing the data that is coming from the patients. So what is the scope in terms of career in science in those directions in India? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think there's one last question that we are going to take, and then I think Anna, I'll let you answer the policy question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm asking this question about India's policy and the priorities that we are having, especially in terms of using IT or IT related technologies and overemphasizing on them at the cost of other basic engineering areas like maybe civil engineering or material science, mechanical engineering, where India lags behind almost many countries, and this Make in India movement is also being stalled because of all these developments not taking place in India. So to keep it maybe more harshly, since the last 15-20 years, the IT may have pulled away all the cream from other branches and maybe slowed them down. So I feel that at the higher policy levels, there should be a rethink over how much manpower we need in IT and how much should go into other technologies and make it more attractive for people to go there. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for the question. So we have 3 questions. I'll give the panelists maybe less than a minute to answer. So Anna, can you go for the climate?
I'll go for the climate question. So I'll answer it slightly differently. What I'll say is India is there are lots of sort of initiatives in India which are moving our energy system towards a more cleaner system. So the popular sort of things we are doing around promoting more solar, increasing electric vehicles in the fleet mix, so you would have heard of. I work around making our energy demand more efficient, so around energy efficiency, which also government has a lot of initiatives around making our appliances that we use more efficient, making buildings more efficient. So there's a lot going on. But saying that, if you look at how our carbon emissions are growing globally, not enough is being done in India, or I may say in most parts of the world, not enough and not fast enough to limit the increase in emissions and to get the emission trajectory towards a downward trend. So we need to do a lot more and very fast.
Amit, do you want to address this question about alternate careers? And then I'll let Anil think about the question on, not enough emphasis on other sciences, and then we'll conclude.
So, you raised two areas. One is in the whole area of the visual arts and graphic design, etc. The other was the clinical research. So there are clinical research, especially I know specifically, it's just exploded. Again, India is becoming a base for people to provide clinical research services globally. And the same thing is true in this whole area of design. One of the things that I just add very quickly is that more and more people are building their career in what is being called this gig economy, which is they're doing 2 or 3 different things versus only working with one firm for a long period of time. Firms also don't hire full time. That's just the reality of life. So that's another path many of you could explore, is how do you become experts in a few areas that you really like and are passionate about. And then you actually have the option to serve the world sitting from your house in many of these professions at least.
The last part, I think society as well as students respond based on short-term gains. So since there were a lot of IT jobs, whether it is civil engineer, mechanical engineer, forget that. Even a BCom or a BSc student who knew a little bit of coding, they were all employed by the IT industry. And that's why everyone moved on to that place. But as a long-term plan for the nation, as a planner, I think we need to have everything in terms of infrastructure. There is a lot of growth available. And there are challenges in aerospace and space industry. I think students in the beginning, that 10th, 11th, 12th, we should show them what are the opportunities available. And if that is done, I think people only moving towards IT will not happen.
Okay, thanks everyone for their time, including the audience.